Dr. Elena Voss was digging in the sand when she found something that would change the universe forever. She had been working in the Egyptian desert for 3 months. The sun was hot, the work was hard, and most days she found nothing but old rocks and broken pottery. Elena was not a famous scientist. She was 34 years old, worked at a small university, and spent most of her time teaching students who did not care about ancient history. But she loved her work. She loved the feeling of brushing away sand and discovering something that no one had seen for thousands of years. On that particular Tuesday, her brush hit something metal. This was strange, very strange. The area she was digging in was supposed to be from a time before humans knew how to work with metal in this way. She worked carefully, her heart beating faster with each stroke of her brush. What she uncovered looked like a cube. It was about the size of a basketball, made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. There were symbols carved into its surface, but they were not Egyptian hieroglyphics. They were not any writing system Elena had ever seen, and she had seen many. She picked up the cube carefully. It was surprisingly light, almost like it was hollow. When her fingers touched certain symbols, they began to glow with a soft blue light. Elena dropped the cube in shock. It did not break. It simply sat in the sand, glowing gently, waiting. She did not tell anyone about her discovery that night. She sat in her small tent, looking at the cube, trying to understand what she had found. Her logical mind told her it must be some kind of modern object that had somehow gotten buried in ancient soil. But the symbols, the way it glowed, the material it was made from, none of it made sense. She spent the next 3 days studying the cube in secret. She took photographs of every symbol. She measured it with every tool she had. She even tried talking to it, feeling foolish as she did so. Nothing happened. On the 4th day, she made a decision. She would take the cube back to her university and study it properly. If it turned out to be nothing, then no one needed to know about her moment of strange excitement. If it was something important, she would share it with the world. Elena did not know that her decision would soon bring her face to face with beings from across the stars. 2 weeks later, Elena was in her small laboratory at Westfield University in Ohio. The cube sat on her desk, surrounded by various measuring instruments and stacks of research papers. She had run every test she could think of, and the results were impossible. The metal of the cube did not match any element on the periodic table. The symbols seemed to shift and change when she was not looking directly at them. And sometimes, late at night when the building was quiet, she could swear she heard the cube humming. She was drinking her 5th cup of coffee and reading about ancient Sumerian writing systems when the cube suddenly got brighter. Much brighter. The blue light filled her entire office, and Elena threw up her hands to protect her eyes. When the light faded, she was no longer alone. Standing in her office was a creature that looked nothing like anything on Earth. It was tall, perhaps 7 feet, with gray skin that seemed to shimmer like oil on water. It had 4 arms and 2 legs, and its face had 3 eyes arranged in a triangle. It was wearing something that looked like a robe made of liquid metal. Elena screamed. This was a perfectly reasonable response. The creature held up 2 of its hands in what Elena somehow understood was a gesture of peace. "Please do not be afraid," it said. Its voice was strange, like multiple voices speaking at once, but she could understand the words clearly. "I am Crix 7, a keeper of the Galactic Archive. I have been waiting for someone to activate that device for a very long time." Elena's legs gave out and she sat down heavily in her chair. Her mind was racing. Aliens, actual aliens, standing in her office in Ohio. This could not be real. She must have fallen asleep at her desk again. "You are not dreaming," Crix 7 said, as if reading her thoughts. "And yes, I can read your surface thoughts. It is a common ability among my kind. I apologize for the intrusion into your privacy." "What?" Elena said, and then stopped. She took a deep breath. She was a scientist. She dealt with strange and unexpected things all the time. She could handle this. What is this cube? How did it get to Earth? What do you want? Crick 7 made a sound that might have been a laugh. You ask questions like a true seeker of knowledge. Good. You will need that quality. The alien moved closer to the desk and looked down at the cube. This device is called a beacon. It was left on your world approximately 12,000 of your years ago by a civilization called the Architects. They were the first intelligent species in this galaxy, and they are long gone now. But they left behind many things, including this. But why, Elena asked, why leave it on Earth? The Architects had a gift, Crick 7 said. They could see possible futures, not with certainty but with enough accuracy to make preparations. They knew that one day the galaxy would face a great danger, a danger that could only be stopped by someone from your world. Elena laughed. She could not help it. From Earth, we barely know how to get to our own moon without killing ourselves. We fight wars over land and oil and ideas. How could we possibly save the galaxy? Crick 7 tilted its head in a way that reminded Elena of a curious dog. That is precisely why the Architects chose your kind. Your species is young and chaotic and often violent, but you are also creative in ways that older species have forgotten how to be. You solve problems in ways that no one else would think of. You make impossible things possible through sheer stubbornness and refusal to accept limits. The alien pointed at the cube. The beacon was designed to activate when touched by someone with the right combination of curiosity, intelligence, and what you might call imaginative stubbornness. Someone who would find it not through technology or power, but through patient work and genuine love of discovery. It seems that someone is you, Dr. Elena Voss. Elena stared at the alien, then at the cube, then back at the alien. Her coffee was getting cold. Her research papers were scattered across the floor from when she had jumped in surprise. There was an alien in her office telling her she was destined to save the galaxy. I think, she said slowly, that you need to tell me everything from the beginning. Crick 7 sat down on thin air, somehow floating as if there was an invisible chair beneath it. The beginning is a very long story, but the important part is this. In approximately 6 months, something is coming to this galaxy. Something that has destroyed 17 galaxies before this one. Something that we call the Void. And you want me to stop it? Elena asked. Not just you, Crick 7 said, but you are the key. The Architects left many devices and technologies throughout the galaxy. Most are locked, unusable, waiting for the right person to activate them. You have proven that you can awaken these technologies. With your help, we might be able to gather enough of the Architect's power to fight back against the Void. Elena thought about her small life, her small office, her small dreams of maybe one day being recognized for her work in archaeology. Now an alien was asking her to save the universe. She picked up the cube. It hummed softly in her hands, warm and welcoming. Okay, she said, let us get started. Crick 7 took Elena away from Earth that same night. She had time to pack a small bag, send a confusing email to her department head about a family emergency, and water her plants. Then she stepped through a portal of blue light and found herself on a ship larger than any building she had ever seen. The ship was called the Wandering Archive, and it was home to Crick 7's people, the Keepers. They were a race dedicated to collecting and preserving knowledge from across the galaxy. Their ship held millions of years of history, science, and art from thousands of species. Elena spent her first week on the ship feeling overwhelmed. Everything was strange. The food was strange. The beds were strange. The other aliens she met were strange. There were beings made of living crystal, beings that looked like floating clouds of gas, beings that had no bodies at all but existed as patterns of energy. But slowly she began to adapt. She was a scientist after all. Strange things were interesting, not frightening. She asked questions about everything. She took notes constantly. She learned that the galaxy was far more complicated than humans had ever imagined. There were hundreds of intelligent species in the Milky Way alone. Most of them were members of something called the Galactic Compact, a loose alliance that maintained peace and trade between worlds. The Compact had existed for millions of years, and in that time it had faced many challenges. Wars, plagues, natural disasters, but nothing like the Void. Crick7 explained it to her one evening, or what passed for evening on a ship without day or night. They were sitting in a room with walls that showed a view of the stars outside. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The Void is not a creature or an army, Crick7 said. It is more like a force of nature. It is entropy itself given purpose. Where it goes, matter and energy are unmade. Stars go dark, planets crumble to dust. Life simply ceases. Where did it come from? Elena asked. We do not know. The first records of it come from a galaxy called the Greater Andromeda, which no longer exists. Refugees from that galaxy brought warnings to others. Some galaxies prepared, some fought, some tried to hide. None survived. Elena felt cold despite the warm air of the ship, and now it is coming here. It is already here, Crick7 said. At the edge of the galaxy, moving slowly inward. In 6 months it will reach inhabited space. After that, complete destruction will take perhaps 100 years, but the end will be inevitable. Then why do you think we can stop it when no one else has? Crick7 turned its 3 eyes toward Elena. Because of the architects. They were the only species that ever succeeded in pushing back the Void, not destroying it but driving it away, forcing it to find another galaxy to consume. And before they disappeared, they left behind the means to do it again, hidden across this galaxy, waiting. And I can activate these hidden things, Elena said. You have already proven it with the beacon. That device should have been impossible for anyone to use. The architects designed their technology to respond only to certain kinds of minds. We have tried for thousands of years to unlock their devices with no success. But you did it by accident, simply by touching it with curiosity. Elena looked at her hands. They were ordinary hands. The hands of a human woman who had spent her life digging in dirt and reading old books. How could they be the key to anything? But she remembered the feeling when she had first touched the cube. The rightness of it, like finding a puzzle piece that fit perfectly. Where do we start? She asked. Elena soon learned that the search for architect technology was not easy. The ancient builders had hidden their devices well. Some were buried deep underground on planets with hostile environments. Some floated in space, disguised as asteroids or debris. Some were right in plain sight, on crowded worlds, but no one knew what they were because they looked like ordinary objects. Her first mission took her to a planet called Nexus 4. It was a massive world covered in cities that stretched from horizon to horizon. Billions of beings lived there, from dozens of different species, all crowded together in towers that reached into the sky. Crick7 believed there was an architect device hidden somewhere on Nexus 4. Ancient records mentioned a power source that had been found there long ago, something that seemed to generate endless energy from nothing. The locals had built a city around it, using its power without understanding what it was. Elena arrived on Nexus 4 with a small team. There was Crick7, of course. There was also a being called Czar, who belonged to a species that looked like walking trees, and a small floating robot named Unit 77 that could translate any language. They landed in a busy spaceport and immediately started searching. The planet was loud and chaotic, filled with strange smells and stranger sights. Elena tried to focus on her task, but she kept getting distracted by everything around her. You are enjoying this, Crick7 observed. It is incredible, Elena admitted. A month ago, I was digging in sand. Now I am walking on an alien planet surrounded by beings I could never have imagined. How could I not enjoy it? Most beings, when faced with the end of everything they know, become afraid or sad. You seem excited. Elena thought about that. I suppose I am scared, But I am also alive, really alive for the first time in years. If the galaxy is going to end, I want to spend whatever time we have left doing something that matters. And this matters more than anything has ever mattered. Crick 7 made that laughing sound again. You are a strange species, humans. They searched Nexus 4 for 3 days. Alina followed her instincts, wandering through the city, touching things, waiting for that feeling of rightness she had experienced with the cube. She got some strange looks from the locals, but Crick 7 explained that she was a researcher studying ancient architecture, which was close enough to the truth. On the 3rd day, Alina found what they were looking for. It was in the basement of an old building, surrounded by machinery that used its power to light the entire district. The device looked like a sphere of pure light floating in the air, warm and gentle. Alina approached it slowly, her heart pounding. No one has been able to touch it, said the building's caretaker, a being that looked like a large beetle. Many have tried. It burns anyone who gets close. Alina reached out her hand. The sphere pulsed once, twice, and then the light wrapped around her fingers like a greeting from an old friend. "Hello," she whispered. "I am here to help." The sphere changed. It grew brighter, and Alina suddenly understood what it was for. Knowledge flooded into her mind, images and concepts that were hard to put into words. This was a power core, yes, but it was also a key, part of a larger system, one of many pieces that needed to be brought together. She pulled her hand back, dizzy and amazed. "I know where we need to go next," she said. Alina spent the next 4 months traveling across the galaxy, finding and activating architect devices. Each one taught her something new. Each one brought them closer to having the power they needed to fight the void. She found a weapon hidden in the heart of a dead star. She found a shield generator buried beneath an ocean on a water world. She found a communication network spread across 100 small moons. Each device responded to her touch, sharing its secrets, becoming part of a larger whole. But the void was getting closer. Reports came in of outer systems going dark. Ships sent to investigate never returned. Entire colonies vanished overnight, leaving behind only empty buildings and silence. The Galactic Compact began to panic. Some species wanted to fight. Some wanted to run. Some refused to believe the danger was real. The Compact's council argued while worlds died. Alina watched the arguments with growing frustration. These beings had millions of years of history and knowledge, but they could not work together when it mattered most. They were too different, too set in their ways, too afraid of change. "They have forgotten how to innovate," Crick 7 explained. "When you live for thousands of years and your civilization has existed for millions, change becomes frightening. The old ways are safe. New ideas are dangerous." "But the old ways will get everyone killed," Alina said. "Yes, which is why the architects knew that the galaxy would need someone new, someone who had not learned to fear change, someone who could think in ways that older species could not." Alina looked at her hands again. She had touched wonders beyond imagination. She had learned secrets that no human had ever known, but she was still just one person. "The devices are almost ready," she said. "We have gathered most of what the architects left behind, but I do not know how to use them together. I do not know how to stop something that has destroyed entire galaxies." "You will figure it out," Crick 7 said. "That is what humans do. You look at impossible problems and refuse to accept that they cannot be solved. You try things that make no sense until something works." Alina smiled grimly. No pressure then. The final piece of the puzzle was found on a small moon at the very edge of the galaxy. This close to the void, the stars had already begun to dim. The universe felt heavy here, tired, like it was getting ready to sleep forever. The device on the moon was different from the others. It was not a weapon or a power source or a shield. It was a chair. A simple metal chair, sitting in the middle of an empty plain, waiting. Alina approached it slowly. Her companion stayed back. They all knew that this was the moment everything had been building toward. She sat down in the chair, and the universe opened up around her. Suddenly she was connected to everything. Every device she had activated across the galaxy was linked to her mind. She could feel them all like parts of her own body. The power was incredible, overwhelming, almost too much to bear. And she could see the void. It was not evil, she realized. It was not cruel or angry or malicious. It was simply hungry. It consumed because that was its nature, the same way fire burns or water flows. It did not hate the life it destroyed. It did not even know that life existed. Alina understood then what the architects had done. They had not fought the void with weapons. They had not hidden from it with shields. They had communicated with it. They had found a way to make it understand that this galaxy was not empty nourishment to be consumed. This galaxy was full of beings who thought and felt and created. They had made the void choose to leave. But the architects were gone now. There was no one left who knew their language, their methods, their secrets. There was only Alina, a human woman from a small planet who dug in sand and asked too many questions. She took a deep breath and reached out with her mind toward the void. Contact. The void was vast beyond understanding. It made the entire galaxy seem small. Alina felt like a single cell trying to communicate with a living being. The difference in scale was impossible. But she tried anyway. She shared everything she had, her memories of Earth, the joy of discovery, the love she felt for her work, her students, her small and ordinary life. She shared the wonder she had experienced traveling across the galaxy, meeting new beings, learning new things. She shared the fear and courage of every species facing extinction. She showed the void what it was destroying. The void paused. For the first time in its endless existence, it considered. Alina felt its attention turn toward her, and she almost broke under the weight of it. This was a being that had consumed 17 galaxies. What was one human compared to that? But she held on. She thought about her mother, who had raised her alone and always told her she could do anything. She thought about her students, who were annoying sometimes but also full of potential. She thought about the beetle-like caretaker on Nexus 4 who had been so surprised when she touched the sphere. She thought about Crick 7, who had waited thousands of years for someone like her. She thought about all the ordinary moments that made life worth living. Cups of coffee, sunsets, the feeling of finding something old and beautiful buried in the sand. This is what you are taking away, she told the void. Not just matter and energy, not just planets and stars. You are taking away meaning. You are taking away the only thing in the universe that gives existence a purpose. The void considered for a long time. Galaxies could have been born and died in the time it took for the void to think. And then, incredibly, impossibly, it began to withdraw. Alina watched with exhausted joy as the darkness at the edge of the galaxy started to recede. The void was leaving, not because it had been defeated or destroyed, but because it had been convinced. It had been shown something new, something it had never encountered before. It had been shown that there was a difference between existing and living. As the void retreated, it left something behind, a gift, perhaps, or an apology. Energy flowed back into the stars it had dimmed. Life returned to the worlds it had touched. It could not bring back what it had already consumed, but it could restore what it had begun to take. Alina fell back in the chair, completely drained. Her connection to the architect devices faded as the emergency passed. She was just herself again, just a tired woman who wanted to sleep for about a year. Crick 7 was the first to reach her side. The keeper's 3 eyes were wide, with an emotion Alina had learned to recognize as wonder. "You did it," Crick 7 said. "You actually did it." "I talked to it," Alina said, her voice barely a whisper. "I just talked to it." No one has ever successfully communicated with the void before. No one has ever even tried. The very idea seemed impossible. Alina laughed weakly. I guess no one told me it was impossible. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light. The void had retreated. The galaxy was saved. And it had been done by a being from a primitive world that most species had never even heard of. Humans suddenly became very famous. Alina spent the next few months dealing with the aftermath. She met with leaders of the Galactic Compact. She answered millions of questions about what had happened. She tried to explain, as best she could, how a simple archaeologist from Earth had managed to do what entire civilizations could not. She told them the truth. She had not used force or technology or ancient wisdom. She had just been stubborn enough to try something that seemed impossible. She had just believed that even the most alien being in the universe might be able to understand what it means to be alive. The compact changed after that. Species that had been separate for millions of years started talking to each other in new ways. They started trying new things, taking risks, thinking differently. They looked at the young species of the galaxy, humans included, and saw not primitive beings to be ignored, but fresh perspectives to be welcomed. Alina eventually returned to Earth. She could have stayed in space, become an ambassador, lived a life of luxury and importance. But she missed her home. She missed her work. She missed the simple joy of digging in sand and finding things that had been lost. She did accept a position as Earth's first representative to the Galactic Compact, but she made them build the embassy in Egypt, not far from where she had found the cube. She continued her archaeological work between diplomatic meetings. Sometimes, late at night, she would take out the beacon and hold it in her hands. It still glowed softly, warm and welcoming. It had started everything. A curious object buried in sand, waiting for someone to find it. The architects had seen possible futures. They had known that the galaxy would face the void again, and they had prepared by hiding technology that could only be used by a certain kind of being, not the strongest or the smartest or the oldest, but the most curious, the most stubborn, the most willing to try impossible things. They had bet the fate of the galaxy on a species that barely knew how to leave its own planet, and they had been right. 1 year after the void retreated, Alina received a visitor. She was working in her laboratory, which was now much larger and filled with equipment from dozens of worlds, when Crix 7 appeared through a portal. "I have news," the keeper said. "The Compact has made a decision." Alina put down her tools. "Good news or bad news?" "Good, I believe. They have voted to establish a new institution. A place where beings from across the galaxy can come together to learn and discover and create. A center for innovation and exploration, and they want you to lead it." Alina stared at her old friend. "Me, I am just an archaeologist." "You are the being who saved the galaxy by thinking in ways no one else could. Who better to teach others to do the same?" Alina thought about it. She looked around her laboratory, at the beacon sitting on her desk, at the stars visible through her window. "Can I still dig in sand sometimes?" she asked. Crix 7 made that familiar laughing sound. "I am certain that can be arranged." And so Dr. Alina Voss, a simple scientist from a small planet, became the founder of the Galactic Institute for Innovation. She spent the rest of her long life teaching beings from across the stars how to think like humans, how to question everything, how to refuse to accept that problems cannot be solved, how to look at the impossible and see opportunity. She never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the feeling of brushing away sand and finding something wonderful. She never forgot that the greatest discoveries often come from the most ordinary moments. The galaxy had been saved not by a hero or a weapon or an ancient prophecy. It had been saved by curiosity, stubbornness, and the simple belief that even the strangest things in the universe could be understood if you just took the time to try. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, a vast and ancient force continued on its endless journey, but it carried with it now the memory of a small being who had reached out across the impossible distance between them and said, simply and sincerely, "I want to understand you." I want you to understand us. That memory would change the void forever. It would not consume again without first looking, really looking, at what it was about to take. It had learned something new from a young species in a young galaxy. It had learned that existence could be more than survival. It could be meaning. And that, perhaps, was humanity's greatest gift to the universe.